Team Edward or Team Jacob? Team Gale or Team Peeta? Michael or Raphael? Since the dawn of time, young adolescents and adults alike have had to make the daunting task of choosing which semi-attractive guy in media they stake their entire personality on. Do you choose the side of the stone-cold hottie with a heart of gold, or the best friend who's just kind of like hanging out? Love triangles have been the cornerstone of romance literature ever since Edgar Allan Poe had to choose between the raven or the door. However, many people find them tiring and exhausting. This is especially the case within romance manga.
So professors, teach me the math of love triangles. Yay, time for book facts!
In romance manga, and specifically the shoujo community, fans are tired of seeing the same recycled love triangle tropes. The girl likes the guy, they start to get a little cozy, maybe even start a relationship, and then bam! In comes the second male lead who tries to get it in between our blooming romance. Maybe if the author's feeling a little spicy, they throw in a second female lead to try and steal the main guy away from the girl. Oftentimes, these triangles are just the same scenarios thrown in to give a little conflict and drama for the main couple to overcome. In some cases, though, this is detrimental to the story, making some characters into villains and stagnating the progress in favor of a higher volume count. But when a love triangle is done right, it can not only add to the drama that we all know and love, but also give characters development and life lessons along the way. I am personally of the belief that love triangles are not an inherently bad thing. Some of my favorite love triangles bring out interesting character dynamics that we may not have gotten otherwise, or they'll bring closure to characters' past traumas. Even if a love triangle is just there for the drama, it can still be highly entertaining as long as the characters are still well written. All that to say, I don't see a love triangle starting in a series and turn tail. I usually sit it out and wait to see what the author has planned. Does this lead to me getting burned more often than not? Yeah, which is why I do understand why so many people are just wary of a love triangle in a series. So before we can talk about the merits of love triangles in a story, let's talk about why they are so hated. There's a good mix of reasons why a love triangle is public enemy number one. The biggest of which would be that they cause unnecessary miscommunications, get in the way of the couple, especially when they're already together, or just they cause too much drama for our weary souls who just wanted to fill the void with some romance. Any combination of these factors can ruin an otherwise fun story, as is the case with so many romance manga. Personally, some of the worst offenders in my book being Namaikizakari and Haru Ride, which could have at best been a fun bickering romance series and also a series that looks at relationships through grief, but both of which became duds because they got weighed down by their love triangles. In Namaikizakari, or Cheeky Brat in English, we get a mix of the miscommunication as well as inserting a love triangle into an already previously established relationship. In this manga, our main couple, Naruse and Yuki, get together pretty early and without too much drama. However, this progress gets stunted throughout the entire rest of the manga when they introduce the second male lead, Hakamata. I say the second male lead lightly with him because while he is the second male character introduced, if you got rid of him in the story, not much would change. For the most part, his purpose is just to cause rifts between Naruse and Yuki, and this happens through almost 20 volumes of the series. The reason Hakamata's feelings for Yuki kept factoring into the manga is because every time he would make any sort of advance, the mangaka would rather have Yuki give non-answers to him rather than be firm and just say no. He would clearly tell Yuki that he likes her and she would blush or just brush it off or something, but never give a firm answer that she wasn't going to ever leave her boyfriend for him. The times she was firm with him, he wouldn't back off either, because he sticks around the whole time. This is spoiler territory for much later in the series for anyone who is reading it in English currently with the release. But Yuki and Naruse are on a break at one point, and of course, as soon as they're on that little break, Hakamata comes swooping in and making moves. Then, at one point, Yuki also decides to go on a date with him because she wants to thank him for something he helped her with. There's just so much mental gymnastics in why Yuki won't just tell him she has no feelings for him, and also why the guy just won't leave her alone. Sometimes it feels like the only reason Hakamata is around is to let Naruse and Yuki have an intense intense make-up and make-out session. Hakamata and Naruse actually had a previous rivalry because of basketball, so I actually find that dynamic to be a lot more interesting rather than just having them constantly fighting over Yuki. Every now and then the series does decide to focus on that rivalry and kind of how Yuki factors in as their basketball manager. However, it almost always ends with Naruse getting jealous, getting in a fight with Yuki, the two don't talk, Yuki realizes she needs to say sorry, and then the two make out. Naruse remains extremely jealous of anything that has to do with Yuki, and Yuki remains stubborn and willfully ignorant until the very end of the series. The progress in their relationship takes one step forward and then 5 steps back almost every chapter, and that gets exhausting before you even reach the finish line. When it comes to too much drama and miscommunications, look no further than Haru Ride. This series had a ton of potential within the first 25 chapters or so. Ko and Futaba had a lot of development, and the relationship had context within the themes of overcoming grief and finding new friendships in new environments. There was even a love triangle in the beginning of the series that was done well between Futaba and her friend who both had feelings for Ko. This one furthered both of their developments and didn't feel messy just for the sake of elongating the story. Then the love square comes in, and Iosaki Saka loves a love square. This love square could have added depth to the story and the characters, but no, instead it makes everything messy and dramatic. Ko becomes a stagnant character who just flounders for the entire second half of the series until his personality does a complete 180 within 2 chapters. Futaba is left with 0 resolve and is constantly seen flip-flopping between her feelings, and Toma is there. All development of the main 2 characters just disappears, and this happens almost immediately after the fact that they just had the biggest development of recognizing each other's feelings again. What was once a pretty good romance drama that had a strong purpose and message became a wishy-washy story that was just too bloated. Toma specifically as a character was just entirely unnecessary to the plot. He doesn't serve much purpose to the story, and even when he is dating Futaba, you still know that this guy has no chance of being endgame. He's the same sort of nice guy from beginning to end, and doesn't even give Futaba herself any growth or development because she does just end up going right back to Ko. His character serves as a minor detour to stop the main couple from being able to meet, because once they would be able to, they would clear the miscommunications that they have and be able to date. And we can't have that now, can we? I haven't talked about the girl in the love square yet, but I do feel like she had some sort of purpose overall. She was there to show Ko that he needs to move on from that part of his life, otherwise he'll be depressed and stuck in the past forever. Unfortunately, the story didn't keep that up the entire time that she was around, but the initial purpose of her being there came across. Anyway, I just enjoyed the second female lead more than I enjoyed Toma's inclusion because he just serves 0 purpose to the story other than having Futaba be unavailable for longer. This leads me to a pretty hot button topic when it comes to love triangles: second lead syndrome or second lead stans. Some love them, some hate them. They're a pretty notorious group of people that I'm sure a lot of you would also say you identify as. Now, I will try to be as unbiased in this as possible, but personally, I'm not a fan of people who seem to only like second leads. To me, it just feels like second lead stans feel bad for the guy, and because their pity is stronger than their interest in the main couple, they'd rather see the second lead win. Usually this would also end up making the story pointless if the second lead won. The biggest case of second lead stans who get under my skin are the ones who think Shirayuki should leave Zen and get with Obi. Obi is a great character, and I like him a lot, but the Snow White with the red hair story would be rendered absolutely pointless if this were the case. Shirayuki's arc is happening right now because she wants to be with Zen and has to up her reputation to be with him as someone who is not of royalty. It would not make any sense if suddenly she gave up on that and just got with Obi. I get that a lot of people want Obi to be happy, but if you don't want Shirayuki with Zen, then I think you also don't fundamentally understand Obi as a character, as Obi very much supports their relationship and the two of them as friends and doesn't want to steal Shirayuki away. The only possible second option other than Zen Yuki ending is a Zobi Yuki ending. Having second lead syndrome does happen though, and I'm not saying that I've never once gotten it. But there is also the angle of why are there so many people who are second male lead stans and not second female lead stans? More often than not, you don't see people who automatically like the second female lead who's introduced just because she was introduced second. No, usually they are villainized beyond belief, and even if they get a redemption arc later in the series, some people still hate them. Even the slight notion of a second female lead being introduced and you see the fandoms rise against her with the strength of 1,000 suns. While I understand that a lot of this comes from the mangaka's writing of making the boy a little ooh-woo softy and the girl just a conniving bitch, the hatred will usually start before the second girl even opens her mouth. All of these factors in and out of the story have led fans to dislike triangles. We're having to solve Pythagorean theorem when we just want to know if the parallel and the perpendicular lines will ever intersect. With all these built-up frustrations, what in the world would make them redeemable? Why am I still able to put up with them when they lead to annoying stagnation in a story? Am I just stubborn and unable to not finish reading a story even if I hate it? Well, yes. But it's also because when a love triangle is done right, it can turn something good into something great. I just talked about Iosaki Saka's series, Haru Ride, but to contrast this, let's talk about her previous series, Strobe Edge. Now, I know many people are very divisive on this series, but I find it to be one of her best love triangles and one of her best stories. Each character had a reason why they were in this love triangle and a reason why they liked each person, while also being entirely fleshed out with motivations that make sense. I find that Strobe Edge uses the drama to further the character growth, while Haru Ride had the opposite effect. Within the three main characters of Strobe Edge, we have the main female lead, Nanako, the main male lead, Ren, and the second male lead, Ando. All three of which have a complicated and interweaving relationship with one another. Ando has the biggest growth as the second lead in this series. He starts off as a playboy with a broken heart, but his arc is about learning to open up and love again. Not just romantic love, but friendship love too. As Ando was best friends with Ren prior to when the story begins, until he found out that his ex-girlfriend was trying to cheat on him with Ren, and this caused a rift in their friendship. Even though rationally, Ando knows it's not Ren's fault, the mistrust in his friend and in love was unable to be fixed. However, him falling in love with Nanako in all her sincerity and kindness helped him grow. He was able to seriously fall in love with someone and face his friend once more to reconcile. He may not have gotten the girl in the end, but his arc and his growth was important to the story. Ren also has some great growth as the main lead, despite a lot of people saying he's a wet blanket of a character. I actually really like Ren, and I think the wet blanket description is kind of missing the point. The reason he's so stone-faced is because of his girlfriend, Mayuka, insisting that he's mature for his age. Since he's 1 year younger than her, and Mayuka is kind of childish herself, he feels like he needs to be the mature one in the relationship, and because of this has kind of lost his youth. His growth from this love triangle comes from Ando letting him be himself and Nanako seeing him for who he is. Ren starts to act more like a high school kid towards the end of the series, cracking jokes with his friends and opening up at school. He needed to have that closure with Ando, as well as being free to be a kid again, which Nanako allows him to do. Now, while I do admit that Nanako is the weak link of the character growth in the trio, she does still have an arc. In the beginning, she doesn't really have her own opinions and she doesn't think for herself. Her friends are telling her who she likes and who she should date, and she just goes along with it because she thinks that's how love works. Falling in love with Ren gave her the desire to speak her mind though, and by the end of the series she learns that having her own opinions and own convictions while also being a little selfish is okay. Ando also helps her with this by consistently giving her the push to tell her she can speak her mind if she wants to. Yes, her whole arc does end up meaning that she becomes a bit of a homewrecker between Ren and Mayuka. However, within the context of the story, I find that it still works. Each of these characters has a purpose in the story, and each has an arc and growth by the end of the story as well. Whether or not you still actually dislike Strobe Edge is up to you, but when it comes to the love triangle, I think it did a great job at conveying its message. Strobe Edge really was the blueprint for Iosaki Saka series going forward, and none since have really had the same impact on me like Strobe Edge has. Although I did like Love Me Not. Another series that I find does the love triangle wonderfully specifically is Futari de Koi wo Riyuu. This is a currently ongoing series that doesn't have official English translations, but is pretty popular in Japan right now. Not only does this one do a love triangle in a much more interesting way than most series, but it also incorporated a second love triangle flawlessly. The story itself is very understated in the romance, and it feels more like a slice of life series than a melodrama. Due to the style of writing, the love triangle isn't shoehorned, and in fact, it has a lot of room to breathe in the story it wants to convey. The first love triangle in this series is between Ando, IG, and Misono, where it is mostly just Ando having a one-sided crush on IG and he kind of leads her on. However, this is how Misono realizes that he has feelings for Ando, and also how he realizes that his best friend might be more of a jerk than he thought. IG strings Ando along for around the first 20 chapters of the series and really hurts her in the end. I think this first part of the story is done so well because it has a great setup for the rest of the series, as well as having a great message of first loves don't always work out, which a lot of romance series don't like to harp on much. Ando had her heart broken in this time. We see how much not having your feelings reciprocated sucks. But we also get to see her get over it and move on. One heartbreak won't be the end, life goes on. The second love triangle is what helps Ando realize her feelings for Misono. While the first part of the series is about heartbreak, the second part is about relationships and dating. How is dating supposed to go? What does it really mean to like someone? And how do you even fall in love with another person anyway? This time the dynamic is between Ando, Misono, and Obi, who is a kid from another school. He meets Ando at a mixer and he just wants to get to know her better because he finds her breathtaking at first sight. Of course, this section has the dramatic moments of Misono getting jealous and overprotective, but I don't think it detracts from anything. This part of the story is more about self-discovery, and I really like that it takes its time to explore that. Ando is exploring what dating would mean for her through Obi, and Misono is learning to be more honest as a person. Most people hate when the second lead gets in the way of the original pairing, or when the story meanders because of this, but I feel like the love triangle in Futakoi is necessary. It gives some great lessons on relationships, and uses the love triangle to deliver these lessons. Futakoi is mid-serialization, so I don't know if maybe my opinions will change in the future, but for right now, it is one of my favorite ongoing romance series. I really love how it's taken a different angle when approaching the two separate trios, and instead of honing in on the drama, it wants the story to feel more lived in. The characters and their actions feel real and closer to how high schoolers would act. While Strobe Edge and Futakoi are two series that I felt like had purpose for the love triangles when the author was writing the series, there are countless other series that are like this as well. For example, Chihaya Furu has been a shining example of taking a love triangle and incorporating it into the story in a more nuanced way, which lets the characters grow with and through their feelings. That manga would not be the same if there was no complicated dynamic between the friend group and their competitiveness. You also have something like Falling Drowning, which uses the love triangle to add tension between the characters and mystery to the series as well. Generally, love triangles don't even have to do anything other than create hilarious situations like in My Love Mix-Up. There are so many ways to create interesting love triangles and interesting dynamics within them. I don't have a big love triangle agenda to push, and this video isn't exactly trying to change anyone's mind on them either. Cause like I said, I understand why they're hated. I myself am not a fan of most of them. They're overused, they often have zero purpose in the story, or they're just introducing some random guy to get in the way. But at the same time, I do think the trope gets way too much heat. I know many people who have told me that they've dropped a lot of the series that I mentioned because they saw a 3-point shape on the horizon. And that just kind of bums me out because a lot of the series that I mentioned are incredibly well done. Love triangles can create interesting and compelling character dynamics while also showing character growth through a whole story. Not to mention, sometimes the drama in small doses can just make the series more fun. All in all, don't hate the trope. Hate the writer who can't handle 3 characters simultaneously.